mysterious stranger moves in to the house where he lives and fills the gap that was really left by his father and opens a window for him into the future. I was thinking, you know, that for me with this movie, once you had agreed to do it, that was great. Now the big problem was like, who was going to play this kid? And you remember that first time we were in that room in Keswick, when Anton came in and sat down and started reading with you. What was going through your mind when you saw him? And
well, there were the three boys all together, weren't there? Two of the young boys came in, and they were very good, but maybe too young and too soft or something. I don't know. Maybe they weren't at the right age. And you prepped me a little about Anton. You said, "But we think this boy is really terrific." The other two boys were really good. Then in walked this young kid, and he reminded me of Tom Sawyer. But he shook hands, he sat out, he seemed very confident, great personality, and I said to you then, he sat, it looks like he's got it, the personality. And then when he did the reading, I thought he was just extraordinary boy. I think all kids are extraordinary who can act. And at that age, I could barely do it myself, I could hardly speak. But he had such poise and confidence without being obnoxious or overbearing. I thought he was just wonderful, wonderful kid.
It's an amazing combination, really, I think, for any sort of child actor, is how to be like that without becoming, you know...
Yeah, it's a strange gift, isn't it? I suppose some of them go off track as they get old into their teens and adolescence, and some give it up and some go on. The ones who survive, I suppose, the voice breaks and all those changes that go on in adolescence. But I hope Anton stays with it. I'm sure he will. And also I thought he was tremendously intelligent and inquisitive about everything, always wanting to know. He wanted me to teach him the piano. And he's a lovely kid.
I remember even one stage you were, I could overhear the pair of you talking on the set, and you were talking about Hamlet, and you were almost like swapping quotes with each other.
Oh yes, he wanted to know about Hamlet, why Hamlet did what he did, and he's got an insatiable appetite, I think also because he comes from Russia, was born in Russia, and his mother is his mentor and wants him to get the best education he can, so he's trying very hard to accumulate knowledge of literature and music, and I think he's a very good guitar player, and I think he's got a musical talent as well. And his mother's a remarkable woman, nice skater,
yeah,
champion ice skater from Russia. But I thought it was a very interesting combination with Anton's birthplace, which is Russia, and then coming here as a child, and he's still got he's got such a mixture in him of his geographical background and his new identity here in America.
The thing that really struck me was that once we started shooting and we were doing some of those big scenes, those long dialogue scenes between Ted and Bobby, the way you chose to do it with Ted never speaking down to him like speaking to a child, but sort of just speaking to him as another person.
Well, I've never mixed easily with children. I have a daughter of my own, but I was never at ease with children. I never knew how to talk to them, so I've always talked to children as if they're adults, because I can't do sweet talk. And I think children pick up on it if you are condescending to them. And I know sometimes the little child, sometimes it's good to get down to their height to talk to them. But Anton is a boy now, he's a growing up young kid. And my instinct was that he's very sharp, very bright, and would spot any phoniness.
What else?
What do you mean?
There's got to be more to it than that.
And I was so impressed by his intelligence and his talent. I remember in the scene we did in the cafe, in the little coffee shop. I remember he did something, he just held my hand, he said, "It'll be okay, Ted."
Ted, take my hands.
Huh?
Don't worry. I won't let the boogeyman get you.
And after you said cut, and that was the end of that section of the scene, and I looked at him and said, "How do you do it? How do you do it?" And I am amazed, because my memories of my own childhood at that age I was either dyslexic or something wasn't quite right with me. I didn't function too well as a kid. I was very backward at school. So I had a retarded education. And I could barely put two words together. I was very shy and very withdrawn. And my question to him was genuine. I thought, how does he do it? Well, the young girl, Mika, how she does it, I think she's an extraordinary talent. All children who can act and stand before a camera and make it look real are remarkable.
It's interesting to hear you say to someone else, how do you do it? How do you do it? Because, of course, it's a question you're asked all the time, how do you do it? But for you, there must have been a moment somewhere back in, when was it, in childhood or when you were growing up, when you discovered you could do this thing, whatever it is, that this acting thing?
I was so backward at school, so slow, wasn't at all swift. And I wandered into the local YMCA in Port Talbot in South Wales. My father told me to get out and do something because he was a bit concerned about me. I was a loner. I was the only child and I was the only offspring of my parents. I had no friends. I was very withdrawn. So I joined the YMCA, the YM. And there was an acting group there and I stumbled into that. I asked if I could join in. And I thought, well, sure beats working for a living. And I found something to do and then I won a scholarship, much to my surprise. And I didn't know whether I could act at all. But I was a very good mimic. Now, that's got nothing to do with acting, but I was a mimic. I was a sort of school clown. And I could make people laugh, and I could imitate schoolmasters, which were authority figures. And then the years went by, and I succeeded in becoming... I stayed in the acting profession after a few tries, and I was very lucky. I just kept going, and I never had any marked time of unemployment. And I found myself, I landed on my feet a lot, like a cat with 9 lives. Looking back on it, I don't know how I got away with it, because I really was a bit of a troublemaker. And I was very rebellious, but they seemed to like what I was doing, and I worked with Laurence Olivier and people like that, and I worked with Albert Finney, and then I made a film with Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn called Lion and Winter. And then the years went by, and I was very, in those early years, very Stanislavski-oriented and method, and which is fine. And I would do copious studies of a character, and I'd read the play over and over again, or the script over and over again. And I'd try to analyze it. And a director in New York called John Dexter, who was a savage director, but he was a great mentor for a lot of us young actors. And he said to me, he said, stop analyzing, just learn your lines, show up and do it. He said, I've cast you in this. You don't need to add to it or take away from it. You are what you are. And Katharine Hepburn said something to me once on Lion and Winter. She said, don't act. You have been cast in this part because you have certain qualities. Be they, you've got a good shaped head, you've got a good voice, you've got a powerful build, and she's got a great presence. She said, you've got a good presence. She said, don't act. Just do what you do. Speak your lines clearly. And I thought, well, that's a very simple way of looking at it. But basically what I've come back to over the years is that it is really simple. I'm watching a kid like Anton. He makes it very simple. But he responds as a young kid can because he's so open. And I had to make myself open as the years went by and simplify everything. And I literally learned my lines and show up and do it. But I do read the script over and over and over and over, many, many times aloud to myself. And that is my only method. And by doing that with myself, I don't go over lines with a person unless we have a rehearsal. I get a glimpse of the man I'm playing. I don't know, it's like developing a photographic plate. And the learning process in the learning of the lines is like dipping it into the fluid that brings the image up. And it works for me. I don't know how. I don't analyze it. It seems to work because they keep sending me the scripts. But that really is as simple as I can make it. And students ask me, young kids ask me, young actors ask me, how do you do it? And I say, well, learn your lines and show up. And they say, well, there's more to it than that. I say, well, I don't know. It's perseverance, I guess. Tom Hanks was on The Actors Studio, and I remember Tom said something very, very, very practical to young students. He said, you just have to keep going. You just have to persevere. You get a lot of knocks, a lot of rejection, he said, but talking professionally, but you just keep going. He said, just keep going. And I thought that was the soundest advice any actor can give to anyone. And if you find you have a talent for it, it'll work itself out. And if you find that you don't have a gift for it, the best thing is to withdraw and find something else to do. And it's not a curse. It's just some people are born to this profession, as I believe Anton is, and the young girl. And I think I was, because I can't do anything else.
But instinct is such a strong part of it, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
And what really struck me was the instinct that you brought to Ted and the touches that you brought, which came from your own past, you know, with your relationship with your grandfather, for example. Ted polishing the shoes, or Ted, the way Ted would dress, and the phrases that Ted would use. That I found really compelling, that you found those elements in your own past.
Well, thank you. Just on first evidence of the script, I saw Ted Brottigan as a loner, as a fugitive from something, but as a lonely man. Probably something in his past that his wife, he was widowed. And there was a dignity about him that he was always well-dressed and meticulous in his appearance. A just man, a fair man, strong. And it recalled very vividly my own grandfather, who was a very proud man, always beautifully dressed. I mean, he was poor, you know, he didn't have any money, but he always patched clothes up, and he always polishing his shoes and keeping his fingernails clean. He's a working man in local steelworks in Port Talbot, and he was devoted to me because he lost his youngest daughter to diphtheria back in the 1920s, and my mother was the sole survivor of the offspring in their family. And so I think he devoted a lot of attention to me when I was growing up. So I was very close to him, but he was a loner. He was a real loner, and he used to spend hours and hours on his own, looking dreamily through the windows of his garden shed. And I used to stand down there with him for hours. I always remember the smell of pipe tobacco, and he used to roll his own cigarettes as well. And he had some kind of strange old philosophy which used to anger my father, who was his son-in-law, not my, because this is my mother's side. No, that angered my father. My father was always worried about everything. Always worried about me, worried about this, worried about that. That was his nature. And my grandfather said, he used to call me George for some reason. My father used to call me Charlie, so I had a strange identity crisis. But my grandfather said, and he was a soft-spoken Wiltshire man from the rural areas of England. And he said, George, he said, don't matter what you do. He said, just enjoy yourself. All you need in life is a piece of string, an apple and a penknife. I don't know what that signified, but I took it to heart, and he said, don't worry, he said, it's going to work out for you all right. Because my father was always worried about my schooling, and my grandfather used to say to my father, his son-in-law, don't worry about him, Dick, he's going to do all right. He's got it in him. He's one of the Yeatses, because my grandfather was a Yeats, related to the poet Yeats. And I loved him very much, and he came very clearly to mind, and the idea of polishing the shoes. I used to watch him polishing his shoes, and he'd talk and talk in the evenings when he was listening to the radio.
The thing that I love about this relationship between Ted and Bobby is it's a very human thing. You know, how originally it was about aliens and supernatural elements. But of course, the only part of that left now is this psychic ability of Ted's, which I still think is a very human thing. I mean, I believe there are people who can sense things that we don't all sense.
Yes.
And what was your feeling about that in terms of the character? And in your own background, you know, your experience of phenomena that either your grandfather or other people were able to sense?
Some years ago, about 30 years ago, I was very psychic, and then I dismissed it because the linear mind dismisses stuff like that. But I was gifted psychically, and I could tell things about people, and I could spot things by just looking at them, and I'd give them I used it as a bit of a party piece, but I would be able to tell them things that had happened to them over the last few days, and they were always shocked. So I had that gift of sight, and sometimes it comes back. I prophesy something, I'll see something, and it'll happen. My own life has been like that. Everything I dreamed of has come true in my life. In fact, it's outdone my dreams. I don't know what that's about. I'm not an expert, but I suppose we all have psychic gifts. There are many people around. I think especially women as well, with that intuitive nature of the female intuition that I think that this phenomenon is alive in all of us, and it's sometimes dormant because we dismiss it or don't pay attention. Synchronicity, for example, has played a great deal in my life. Coincidence, strange coincidences. So I was very open in playing this part. I knew, well, if we have a moment, I'll tell you what happened, and I know you know this story. And congratulations, by the way, on this wonderful film of yours. But you know the story. Briefly, I was in Florence making a movie called Hannibal, and I was sitting by the pool reading Bill Goldman's book, who wrote this screenplay, It's a memo, a memoir, and he mentioned me